everyone, and this is the second session of our National Research Platform Fall Training Series for the day. It's our third week in total, and today we're going to be talking about using agentic AI tools and large language models on the National Research Platform. Now, one thing to note here, similar to the previous sessions, is that this session is up to date uh, as of time of making this session and presenting it. But to make it long-lasting, your main source of information should always be NRP's documentation, which is at nrp.ai. So nrp.ai is NRP's website. You can see everything you need in that link, including how to reach us for support, our documentation, your user portal where you manage namespaces and users and so on, visualizations, and information about the project, the team, and the grants and so on. nrp.ai/documentation is sort of a live documentation that is always up to date, always updated whenever we add new features. And of course, like always, please make sure you're on our Matrix servers. Anybody just joined in right now without attending the previous sessions, please, here are the steps. So nrp.ai/contact for our contact info, add HTTPS to the clickable link. And HTTPS nrp.ai/documentation. This is the same thing as visiting docs.nrp.ai. And of course, all the training information and the recordings will be posted on the training webpage. There's a YouTube link that has some of the sessions. The rest will be posted as fast as possible. And we'll send a notification on Matrix that we posted the recordings. Now to get started with the session, so like we talked in previous sessions, there are three main entry points to using the cluster, which are JupyterHub, Coder, and Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is the traditional command line tool, command line interface that allows us to interact with the cluster itself. So you can use kube control as a CLI and interact with the cluster in the form of YAML definitions, different commands that list things, delete things, update, read, so on. And we also have Coder and JupyterHub, which both of them are web services. So you access them through your browser. They're both running in Kubernetes because everything on NRP is running in the scope of a Kubernetes cluster called Nautilus. And both of these web services give you an interface where you can request hardware from. So you specify with actual web interface pickers, I want this much CPUs, this much GPUs, and so on. They're meant for easier access without having to go through Kubernetes. But for all three access points, you need to be part of a namespace or a group on the portal. What we mean by group here is when you visit the nrp.ai/namespaces, you need to see something you're a part of, an entity. So the distinction here is that all namespaces are groups. So each listing on the web page is a group, but namespaces are groups that are mapped to an actual thing in Kubernetes. So namespaces are groups that have a scope in Kubernetes for those of you who want to run things in Kubernetes. But to access the cluster services like JupyterHub, you only need to be part of a group. It doesn't have to be a namespace, but it can be. And now using NRP's JupyterHub, this is something we talked about a little bit in the previous sessions. So JupyterHub, we provide two main JupyterHub instances, JupyterHub-West and JupyterHub-East, both .nrp-nautilus.io. And I'm going to paste the links in chat once we start the interactive part. You can see those two instances both give you a GUI picker that allows you to provision resources as you can. And both of them are tied to persistent storage. So you can see here the description says your /home/Jovian, which is the name of the user in JupyterHub pods, JupyterHub containers. By default, you get 5 gigabytes of persistent storage. And like we talked about in previous sessions, that persistent storage is coming from an actual different server. So we have servers and nodes that spin up storage, and we have nodes that your workflows and your pods run on. One thing to note here is you fill up the 5 gigs or whatever your persistent volume size is. If you fill them up, Jupyter as a process will start to crash and you won't be able to start future instances, which we can fix by expanding the volume. But so you don't get disrupted, make sure you don't fill it to the brim. We can always extend storage. If you need more storage, we can always provision more storage as long as you don't fill it to the brim because that leads to your workspace actually crashing. And the main thing we're going to be talking about here today in Jupyter Hub is something called Jupyter AI, which is an extension that allows us to use NRP's LLMs. And it gives you plenty of features that we're going to be showing you, along with a side panel and well, what Jupyter calls magics, which is a way of using Jupyter AI inside of your notebook in actual cells that call the LLMs. And this is what we're going to be mostly talking about today. Before Q&A, let me just show you. So first thing, here's the link. And the two instances are not connected to each other. So if you provision data here, you don't, that data is only accessible in this one. So if you use West and you use East, you'll see your volume or home directory is different for both. And now let's start exploring a little bit together. So this is my terminal. And like we said, all trainings are on this link right here. So you can see our GitHub repo with the training. I sent it in chat for everyone. Uh, assuming someone is joining us for this session before without the previous one, let's say we don't have the directory. I'm in my terminal. I can just run git clone, and this is a public repository that I can just clone the repository or or open it in my browser and use the GUI as well. And once I have my repository, you can see there we go. So these are my directories. The sixth one has agents and LLMs. See, it has the code, the slides, and the README. So inside of code, this is what we're going to be exploring. So first thing is interactive OpenAI endpoints. And let me show you with the browser here. If you go exploring our documentations, which are docs.nrp.ai or nrp.ai/documentation, these are NRP's docs. You can see on the side here, AI/LLMs. So AI or LLMs. See NRP-managed LLM. And you can see here we have getting API tokens and we have chatting with NRP's LLMs. Both of them depend on the same LLMs that are run on NRP's GPUs, the same GPU pool that when you request GPUs, you're requesting from. So we always have a set of GPUs that are used to spin up LLMs for the cluster, which means when you're sending prompts, they're getting sent to the LLMs. You're not spinning up more LLMs on GPUs when you use the NRP ones. Of course, this is for inference. For prompting, this is separate from if you're doing LLM research, you can spin up your own LLMs on GPUs that you request within your namespace. So we have multiple chat interfaces, like Libra Chat, for example. You can see here, Libra Chat, login with Authentic. It's the same logging in mechanism that we use for Jupyter Hub, for the portal, for whatever we want, and we can say hi, and this will talk to my LLMs on my cluster. So that's one way of interacting with NRP's LLMs. All right, I can specify let me use different LLM, start a new chat. And see here, I'm using GLM and I can interact with it just similar to how, let's say, you act with ChatGPT or a different model with a chatbot-like interface. And let me run back to docs. And we have even more interesting ways of interacting with the LLMs that we're going to be talking about today. So you can get more access by actually using the API key. So Light LLM is a service that we've used that you might have used before. It's being deprecated with time. So in our session, as of today, the current status is that we're going to be using Envoy to access our LLMs. So you can see here. The endpoint is ellm.nrp-knowledge.io. If you visit this in the browser, you won't see anything because this is the API endpoint. This is not a web page that you visit with the browser. So at this point, if this fails, don't panic. You're in the right spot. Or if -v1, if this fails, you're still in the right spot, but you're not going to be using the browser. To access this endpoint, the second thing you need is to create a token. You can see here, start from creating a token. Actually, let me send the link in chat. So NRP LLM docs. This is the doc page, and let me see where I put the chat window. NRP envoy API endpoint, not website. Next step is to create a token. So this takes me to nrp.ai/LLM token, which you can see it still here. You can see in user, once you're logged in, user LLM tokens, you can say my LLM tokens here. And you need to be part of a group to be able to create an LLM token. And let me show you here. So, so this is our namespaces page, and this shows me everything because I can see all the namespaces. But for those of you, for example, who are using the training one, you'll see we have NRP going to UCSD. Let me find it. Going to UCSD, NRP-dev, MFSADA. This is my namespace where I deploy my stuff. And you can see training, test, to delete later. And there's a coloring convention here. So red means a group. So this has no existence in Kubernetes. And blue means a group that is a namespace. So a group is any, let me call it bucket or group or list here, listing here. And you can see blue maps to the namespace. So you can see with our command prompt, we are able to use this namespace. So I can say cube control get pods and use this namespace. You can see it does exist as a namespace. Meanwhile, nrp-dev is not an actual namespace, so I can't get pods from it. You can see no resources found. Of course, the message does not indicate that it's found. It will say no resources found in whatever arbitrary name you put in. Now, yellow and green are the two colorings that we care about. So yellow, like for example, NRP-AI, this is a group that has access to LLM token generation. So whenever you're in a yellow one, you have the yellow one assigned to you, that means you can generate LLM tokens. If you're a namespace admin, let's say I'm a namespace admin here, so I can click on this training test to delete later, and I can scroll down, and under it, I can create a training test delete LLM group. And here I have two options. I can make it an LLM group or a Kubernetes namespace or both or neither. Now I want to generate LLM tokens, so I'm going to add Light LLM. Of course, this is because we rely heavily on Light LLM and we're moving to deprecating it. So eventually this will not be called Light LLM, it will be called Envoy or LLM. But let me add G here. So once I create it, it'll give it a minute to show up. And you can see here, it shows up as green. Now, yellow, my bad. The green ones, those are namespaces that have LLM access. So if you're part of a green one, you can use it for Kubernetes, you can use it for LLMs. If you're part of a yellow one, you can use it for LLMs. And now since I created it and I'm part of it, I can run back to this. And I should see my LLM group if I'm part of one. So you see when I try to create a new key, I can see it shows up here. And let me call it my key one. And I'm just gonna go and assume everyone on the call does not have access to an LLM group because you're just hearing about it now. So you don't have to be part of a group to be able to follow along with it. You do have to be part of a group to be able to use NRP's LMs in general, but for the sake of following along with this session, I'm going to create a key here in this session. Of course, if you're watching this not live, you won't be able to use this key because it's only going to remain for the duration of testing, and then in the duration of training, and then in the Q&A, I'm more than happy to show you and provide support on joining groups. So I'm just gonna paste the API key in chat, and you're all more than welcome to use it, the same key, and we're all gonna have LLM access through this key. So it is publicly available. When you generate a key, you have to hide it. Per policy, you have to hide it. This is your own LLM key. You're responsible for keeping it safe. But for us, we're going to be sharing this key for now to be able to follow along this tutorial. And now I have the two pieces that I need, which are the API key and the endpoint. And we provision LLMs through what is called OpenAI endpoints. So this is, you'll see a lot of AI tools mention endpoints as OpenAI endpoints. This does not mean they're ChatGPT or any proprietary model from OpenAI. This means they are using the OpenAI endpoint serving with VLLM. So uh, basically OpenAI set the standard for how the libraries call the LLMs, but this does not mean you're using ChatGPT. You're using publicly open models that are hosted on NRP's hardware. And you can see what models we have by scrolling down here. You can see in the doc page, you have some code that you can try, but you can see what models are available. Green means it's generally available. Yellow means we're just evaluating it. So we hosted LLMs to see if how well they do. There's no guarantee they'll still remain provisioned and hosting, and we have the yellow ones, which are being moved to being deprecated. So for the sake of trying it, you can see the model name, its full name from Hugging Face, and some features about it. And you can see some example scripts that you can use. So two things to note here is a lot of tools use the same naming convention for endpoints and endpoints and API keys. So OpenAI API key, and you can see it's using your OS's environment variable. So for those of you on Windows, this might be a little different. For those of you on Mac and Linux, it's easier to set up environment variables, but we're going to be using JupyterHub for a big part of our demo, so no worries. So you can say export OpenAI key as like this, and you can say export OpenAI base. This is sometimes called endpoint. It's called different tools have different naming conventions. And for those of you watching live, I'm just going to show you what I posted. So these are what we're going to be using. And different tools have different naming conventions and different ways of dealing with the endpoints. So you can see some tools, you just need this link with HTTPS, of course, for the endpoint. Some tools also require the V1, and some tools also require the V1 dash models. So if you see any files signs of failure, you might need to add V1 or models and test. Now in our repository, you can see list models. You can see here what we're doing. So we're using a curl request, and this curl request, it's sending my API request to my endpoint. See full with the V1 dash models. And I'm just curling at this with my bearer token, my API token, which is defined as my LLM token. So I'm going to run export, and I'm going to say my LLM token equals, let me copy it over, and then I'm going to copy this and paste it. You can see this lists the models that we have. So let me copy and paste the commands and you can run them locally. Of course, locally can mean everywhere. This is a public available endpoint on the internet. The way it authenticates is through your bearer token. We don't have a policy that says you have to use it within the cluster. That means you don't have to use the LLM from within a pod. You can use it locally. You can use it with your IDE. You can connect whatever toolings you use now with different models. You can connect them to NRP's models. And let me show you the other script. So chat completion, this is what we use. Let me show you an example here. So this is our script. So you can see here, this is another curl request that is using model and message based on what we give it. So we can say it's called chat completion. We can give it message and model. So message could be hello, and model can be GLM-V. And you can see here, because we're using the API, this is the full chat completion response. And you can see reasoning content. I see the user just said hello, and this is simple greetings. I should respond politely and warmly. I'll start with a so on, yada, yada, yada. And you can see the LLMs respond. And we can take it a step further and we can use Python. You can see an example here and how to use it with Python. And this is how you use NRP's LLMs. And if you use agentic tools, you can hook up those LLMs to agentic tools. Now, the more interesting part, and I'm hoping everyone is part of a namespace and you're part of a namespace or a group and you can access JupyterHub. And let me show you. So this is how JupyterHub starts. It's going to send you the link. And I see a question, is there any GUI do you recommend for these endpoints and LLM calls? So if you want to use the LLMs for simple prompting, similar to how you use, like, for example, ChatGPT, you can use LibreChat, which we provide, and then you have a simple interface. And there are existing platforms and apps and community-driven platforms that you can hook up your same API key and endpoint to, and you can use the LLMs for. And the main thing we want to show you is Jupyter AI here. So if you use Jupyter and see here for available LLMs, this is the link. You can see these are their names, and this is full names from Hugging Face and the names we use. So you can see I specified GLM-V, and this responds to the GLM 4.5V. And now we go to JupyterHub, and I want to pick an NRP image. So NRP images, the ones that are starting with the word NRP. So NRP deep learning and data science, NRP desktop, NRP OSGeo, so on. Those images are already provided with Jupyter AI installed. So I'm going to pick the PyTorch one, for example. And here I don't have to request GPUs because the LLMs are hosted at GPUs. I'm not requesting GPUs from my LLMs here. I'm accessing them through the pod. And I'm going to start my instance. And we're going to wait on it. Hopefully everyone can follow along these steps and you're able to follow along and see your instance start. This might be a little slow for all doing it at the same time, but it should start it for everyone relatively quickly. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I'm just looking in the background, making sure everybody's pods are starting. All right, so I see everybody's pods are happy. They just need some time. Let's give them some time. So one thing to note here is that, for example, my volume is a little relatively big. Uh, that makes it a little harder to mount, so I'm gonna give it some time, wait for it to start. I see everybody's instances should be up and running. If anybody has any issues, please let me know. So I see a question. This is making a pod by using Jupyter as the interface. So yeah. So actually everybody can see it. So if you let me type it here so you can. So this is the, for example, this is the namespace that JupyterHub runs in. You can see the pod. So you can see your own pod on there. So it is running a pod that is using Jupyter. And similarly, you can spin up your own Jupyter Hub. That's the main topic of next week's session. And you can launch a pod that runs Jupyter and expose it to the public internet as well, or expose it to your local interface somehow. We'll show you how to do that as well in future sessions. Now, this is my Jupyter. You can see my files are here. It's okay if you don't see any files. It's because I made a little bit of a mess here. You can see you might see different launchers based on what image you pulled. So my PyTorch one has VS Code, for example. If you pull the desktop GUI one, you'll see a desktop launcher and so on. But the main thing you should be seeing is this icon right here for Jupyter AI. And if you don't see this, that means you're not pulling an NRP image. You might be pulling an official Docker image or a BData image or a different image from the list that does not have Jupyter AI. But if you pulled an NRP image, you should see this icon here. And now we're assuming we're setting this up for the first time. So I'm just gonna go a little bit slower because I see some instances are still starting. So as soon as you launch, Jupyter AI on the side, and assuming you're running for the first time, you see a configuration cog icon right here, which you can click on. And you only have to do this the first time. So after that, it is saved. You don't have to specify it every time. So we're gonna be going through it together. Here in completion model, you're going to select the OpenAI general interface. So all the other ones, those are actual ChatGPT models, but general interface means the interface way of provisioning, which, like we said, we call them OpenAI endpoints. And model ID, like we said, you grab that from the Alight LLM names based on what you want to use. Let me use GLM-V as my model. And base API URL. Also, you don't specify this, even though it says optional. Optional means if you don't specify it, it's assuming you're talking about OpenAI and ChatGPT, but we actually have our endpoint. So we're gonna be using this one right here. And you can see this is one tool that requires the V1. Otherwise, it's gonna complain if it doesn't have it. So use this as JupyterHub base API URL. And I'm not going to use embedding model for this demonstration. I'm going to be using API keys. Now, this is a tricky part. If you're launching for the first time, you can put it in, click save, and it's all done. If you're changing it, which what I'm doing here, so I'm using R key, I hit the edit button and I can paste it. Let me grab it from chat and paste it here. And here's the tricky part. I have to click this twice, once and twice, and see the updated successfully. Otherwise, if it doesn't show you this, it most likely will fail. And I hit save changes and I run back with the arrow here and I can say hi. You can see it is working. This is using NRP's LLMs. And now I can go back and I can hit forward slash and you can see ask how to print hello world with Python. You can see it shows you this command, for example, let's say I have a notebook open. Okay, we have a notebook here. You can see the buttons. Insert above a active cell, below, replace, or just copy. I can say insert below and run. Another thing is, let's say I made a typo and I ran and it says name print is not defined. I can go back to the panel, / fix, and that's all I have to do because uh, I selected the cell. It already knows the context because I selected the cell, and I can hit the replace button, and that's it. Generate, this is a more interesting part, a Python Sudoku solver, and this might take a few minutes because it's generating a full notebook. So I'm just gonna leave it running in the background and show you a little bit of an interesting part. And the commands that I ran, so the how can we have access to the notebook files saved here from the terminal? So the commands, you can just follow them along with so the commands are just, you can see here, if I type in /, that's all you have to follow along. So /ask answers, /generate, generates a notebook, and /fix fixes a cell. And as you can see, I'm just using print here, but the other interesting part of it that I'm going to be showing you is, let's run back to our training repository and see code, the Jupyter AI notebook. So let me copy the link over and paste it here, and you can see a more interesting part. I'm just going to be talking about it. Let me just answer a question. So does this have MCP support? So Jupyter AI as an extension itself, it does not have MCP support, but as far as I know, of course, and if there are any recent updates, please feel free to correct me. But for MCP support, you can use whatever framework that you have with NRP's available LLMs, whether programmatically or if there's any available tools that implement MCP, you can always use them with NRP. And I'm gonna show you. So this notebook, if we download it, let me say, see, I downloaded, and let me just go back to, here it is. Just gonna grab it, copy it over to my JupyterHub, override because it already exists. And this is our notebook. So let's show you magic. So what Jupyter calls magics is running the AI LLM calls, the Jupyter AI LLM calls from within the notebook. So you have to load the extension Jupyter AI Matrix or reload it whenever you want to use this. You can add it to all notebooks. And I'm importing OS and setting the OS environment variables. You can also do that in terminal directly. But I like to add that to my notebooks. Same thing here. So, and of course, if you're setting your API key, make sure you don't share the notebook with anyone with the key inside it. But same thing here. The endpoint has to be with -v1. And of course, what the endpoint is, always refer to our documentation. And the API key, we're going to be using the one we send. So this is what it's going to look like. Let me send it in chat. Of course, you should have access to the notebook. Please let me know if you're not able to access the notebook. And now the magic's naming and command and naming conventions. So percent is one magic call when you're using one command. 2% signs means that it's expecting context, so expecting a prompt in our case. So, send it here. So I'm telling it OpenAI-chat-custom. This tells it to use a custom endpoint. So we use LLM NRP's one, not OpenAI's one. So this is not optional. This is not an arbitrary name. This is set by Jupyter AI. And I can specify the name I'm using. So GLM-V, I can ask it hello. This is answering from GLM-V. I can say DeepSeek-R1. Now I'm answering from DeepSeek, assuming it's up and running. Here we go. Uh, the answers differ between what LLM you're running. And another thing, I can say -F for format, and let's say HTML, I can have it generate HTML. So I can tell generate a raspberry with hello in it. Let's see if it's any different from the one that Gemma gave me when I was trying, but it looks like it's the same. Oh, sorry, this is running Gemma. Let's try DeepSeek. Yeah, let's see if it does it any differently. Slightly different. That's good. And Gemma -F math gives me LaTeX for math, quadratic equation. Let's see if DeepSeek does it better. The R1 does it much better. And now you can see I have a command. Actually, let me send these in chat, but I'm assuming you have access to the notebook. I can use register as a command. I believe there's an update one also. Let's see. Yeah, update if there's an existing alias and register for the first time. So a single percentage column, register Gemma is me just saying Gemma instead of the whole thing every single time. So I can just say AI register Gemma as OpenAI check custom Gemma 3, or I can just use GLM-V. I can tell it give me Markdown and a tutorial on backtracking with Python. And this should give me a full tutorial in Markdown. Just gonna wait on it. And here you can see backtracking with Python 3, and it gives me a full notebook, a full tutorial with the coding example. And speaking of notebooks, we can go back to the panel and you can see here, I have created your notebook. You can see where I created it, home, Jovian Sudoku solver, and can run back in Sudoku solver. And this whole thing is LLM generated. And let me try running it and see if it made any mistakes. Of course, the performance and the quality of the output is dependent on the LLM itself and where you're running. So import Sudoku, which we don't have a Sudoku Python file from the previous, so that's one thing to note, and so on. And I hope this gave you an overview of what's available, what's in Kubernetes. There's also different agentic AI tools. To name a few, there's Aider, there's Goose. Those are agentic AI coding helpers that you can, for example, Goose is a command line tool that you can launch within your directory with your project and use the same endpoints we used and then ask it questions about your coding repository or ask it to do tasks with coding. Of course, all comes with version control and Git. And you and you can use the endpoints however you see fit with your own API key, but just please make sure it is safe. And I think this is a good place to stop. The only thing I want to mention here is that we have the magics and we have the side panel and the way Jupyter AI is configured. And this is not an LLM, and this is not an NRP thing that we can modify. This is how Jupyter AI is configured. The side panel and the notebooks themselves and the magics, they have their own separate authentications. So if you set up the environment variables here, this does not make the panel authenticated. You still have to use the gear icon and do it. Likewise, if you do it here, you still have to run it here. You can see your one character off and it won't work.